Welcome to the Venly Expert Talks, where we aim to inspire Web3 builders with great stories from great minds. I'm your host, Alexandra Ahrens, and I'd like to remind you that you can always reach out to us on Twitter, Discord, or LinkedIn with ideas for the podcast and questions for our guests. Great. All right. So, welcome to episode 13 of the Venly Expert Talks. Today we have Jesse Whiteside, Director of Business Development at Hashport. We are going to be talking about interoperability and what it means and why it's important. So, Jesse, first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind starting out, I'd love to hear about your background and what led you to this point and your background in crypto.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Ontario, Canada. My original background is in finance and business. I was a financial advisor for quite a few years and have had a whole host of different jobs in and out of tech. I initially, back in 2012, came across Bitcoin, but like many people in their first go round, didn't really know what to make of it, and it was a bit too fringe for me at the time. And I sort of just, put it back on the shelf for the time being. And it wasn't really until 2017, when Bitcoin had its next major run, that I sort of stopped and actually focused on the space for a considerable amount of time. And it was around this time as well that I learned about Hedera Hashgraph, a new distributed ledger technology that was coming out that, purported to be able to, ameliorate on a lot of things to do with blockchain. So I was very interested in that. And then over the next 4 years, I proceeded to, just consume and absorb as much information as I possibly could on the space. And then, this past in 2021, I should say, about middle of 2021, made the decision to jump into the space full time. And been here ever since.
Great.
So, it's incredibly exciting, and there's always stuff to learn and do in the space.
Changes quickly,
which I love.
for sure. So
Absolutely.
Great. So obviously you work for Hashport. I'd like to get a little bit of information for everyone listening. What is Hashport? What do you do there? What's the goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hashport is an enterprise-grade public utility that facilitates the movement of digital assets between distributed networks, which allows them to extend the functionality of those assets in a secure and cost-effective way. Essentially, it's an interoperability solution. I'm the director of business development for Hashport, and as such responsible for coordinating and helping to implement a lot of the go-to-market strategies for the platform. Things such as adding new networks, tokens, and features, or all of the things that I'm interested in doing to enable users and, dApps and developers to be able to harness new use cases or, augment their business strategies as a result.
Okay, great. And would you say that your customers are pretty industry agnostic, more specific?
Yeah, so the platform has been developed to be platform agnostic, and network agnostic. And so the first networks that are connected to Hashport right now are the Hedera public distributed network, along with Ethereum and Polygon. However, over time, in the coming months and years, we're going to be adding a whole host of networks that people know and love currently. And just through that, being able to offer increased and enhanced flexibility to users looking to move certain assets between networks and allow for different use cases to arise, or for the individual user to potentially take advantage of opportunities on other networks that they may not necessarily have access to, by leveraging the assets that they already have and creating representative versions on those other networks that they're looking to go to, and then use in DeFi applications or any other dApp that they may want to integrate those assets with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've read a lot about your Validator Swarm. Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about who makes that up and how they fit into the process?
Yeah. So the Validator Swarm plays an integral component of Hashport. There's 9 industry leading organizations that comprise the Validator Swarm currently. And we've taken a page out of Hedera's book in the sense that they have a governing council that looks to, manage and develop the network in a decentralized, democratic sort of way. And in that same vein with Hashport, especially from a security standpoint and having multi-signatures to ensure transactions and assets that are locked on the network, we've chosen to enlist these, highly regarded organizations. And so I can quickly walk you through who they are. The HBAR Foundation is the Hedera Network's newly created independent growth organization that has a endowment of HBARs to be able to essentially go out and help developers to create new applications that leverage the Hedera platform. The Polygon Network, which is one of the most promising L2 networks currently running on top of Ethereum. Galaxy, which is a social media platform for influencers and celebrities. It's created by Spencer Dinwiddie of the Brooklyn Nets. And BCW Group is a multifaceted digital asset consulting firm and platform creator. They create software as well. Hex Trust is one of Asia's largest digital asset custodians, and we love having them on board. WorldPay from FIS is a Hedera council member, but they also happen to be one of the first Fortune 250 companies to take on a validator role of this kind of capacity. WorldPay processes anywhere from 60 to 70% of the world's financial transactions and processes those in a variety of forms. StableNode is a company in the MakerDAO ecosystem, and the DAI stablecoin. Animoca Brands, one of the biggest and probably the most successful gaming company in the distributed ledger space, with lots of great titles and games to their name. And then lastly, rounding out the Validator Swarm, we have LimeChain, who is a very highly regarded systems integrator and technology architect that has also created and developed Hashport with us.
Very nice. Awesome. One of the benefits of using Hashport is the movement of assets between different blockchains in a cost-effective way. Yeah. Can you share a little bit about how you determine the most cost-effective way and how that's different from other players in the market?
Yeah, so we've taken the approach, the way that it's currently working is effectively a volume-based or percentage-based of the transfer. So there's a 50 basis point fee on the transfer for users. And in that way, a smaller transaction obviously has a much smaller cost. Larger transactions is a larger cost, but on the percentage, it's the same. So it's pretty equitable in that way. Some other platforms will just charge a flat fee regardless of the transfer amount, and that could be high for lower transactions, and that could be very even more cost effective for larger transactions. We also have and are building secondary channels for larger volume based use cases to be able to operate and function with better costing. That makes more sense in terms of those specific use cases, just because, if there is a significant amount of volume, it doesn't make sense to not be able to provide that to those developers. And I mean, the ability to have a easily calculated, amount, so you know what you're getting, for your transfer, depending on what you're holding and bringing over, just adds to the ease of use of the platform.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Another thing that I saw come up is that
Yeah.
the Hashgraph consensus algorithm became open source.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the community?
Yeah, I've thought about that quite a bit, and I think on the balance of the whole, it's going to be very powerful for the community and just for the space in general. The ability to leverage that technology and implement it into potentially different networks and use cases that one would want to have high throughput, low time to finality and absolute finality and the security properties of being asynchronous, Byzantine, fault tolerant. Those three things are, very, very sought after, and Hedera for its specific implementations of that consensus algorithm can enable use cases that other platforms may be able to compete in two of the three areas, but then, have to make a sacrifice on some of the others. So I think it will be over time, it will really, spawn the growth of a lot of new exciting ideas in the space and enable a lot of use cases that and also attract the attention of the developer community that's out there in the space. I think being able to use a open source tool such as this consensus algorithm just will lead to exponential growth of users and developers playing around with it and coming up with groundbreaking ideas.
Fantastic. That kind of leads us into our main point, I suppose. So, big general question for you. What is interoperability for you? And yeah, why is it important?
Yeah, it's the buzzword of interoperability is about right up there with metaverse right now. It's pretty close, and for good reason. I mean, in order for us to have an open, free metaverse that everyone is talking about right now, we're going to need to have different standards and ability to move digital assets and representations of things seamlessly across, different networks and games or what have you. I don't think interoperability, I couldn't put a finger on exactly what it is to me because it isn't one size fits all. I think that depending on what you are doing, what your use case is, interoperability is going to mean something for one person, and it could mean an entirely different thing for another organization or person. So, there are things such as, in-game assets being able to be migrated between networks or even between games potentially. That's one of the big things that, would be looked at. That's one thing that might not necessarily, require the same things as potentially a developer looking to migrate their DApp to another network altogether and just move away from their existing one and, move their non-circulating supply and essentially have users use an interoperability solution to migrate networks. So I think there is a broad spectrum of what interoperability is and means to other people. And I think over time, there will be certain categories for interoperability that are more talked about or implemented. But I think it's really going to be up to what developers and users make of interoperability and what those demands, market demands are that drive those needs.
Mm-hmm. Can you make any predictions about what categories you think those might be in the near future?
I really think there might be some standardization, in terms of how to implement interoperability solutions. I know that there's quite a few interoperability solutions out there right now, with more coming online every day. Everyone's trying. That's the greatest thing about this space is, never before, in human history has there been this many kind of social experiments happening at the same time concurrently. And I think that through that experimentation, we're going to find out exactly what it is. I would think that the movement of the ability for platforms to move between networks and, individual users, assets being able to be moved around between games or networks is going to be important. Also, I think interoperability will help enterprises and business use cases potentially retool their process paths for asset settlements and things of that nature, where they might be going before, through traditional methods of the SWIFT and banking system. There might be short circuits or shortcuts that can be made using interoperability solutions and distributed ledgers that significantly reduce time and cost to accomplish the same thing. So I think that's what we'll see in the future is a lot of focus and attention on this, just the same as the metaverse, because I think they go hand in hand. And as a result, I think we'll get a lot of those things over time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So over time, for sure. I guess I'm going to press you in the next, or right now, or in the next few months, would you say that interoperability is going to be kind of the top level USP for projects, like most important, or no?
That's a good question. I think that there are, if you look at what is happening with a lot of these new L1 networks and L2 networks residing on Ethereum or ZK rollup solutions, I think there is going to be quite a bit of demand for interoperability solutions that facilitate the movement of assets onto those networks and platforms to those other networks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Hashport decided against having a native token. What would you say are the market implications of that?
Yeah, there's a couple market implications for that. One being regulatory. We didn't want to have some interoperability solutions have decided to have a network token. We decided against that, particularly because if businesses and users are relying on the platform, we didn't want to have a potential risk be suddenly, there's regulatory concerns that potentially shut down the platform. And as a result, businesses and users are impacted from that. The other is purely functional. By having a platform token, you essentially add an extra layer of complexity.
Sure. Do you believe we will see standards in NFTs like avatars that need to be interoperable? Is that something that's coming for us?
I think that's the dream.
Okay.
I think that's what everyone aspires to have, and you see things like Ready Player One, things of that nature, and that's what's being sold to us right now. And I think if you just look at the pace of technological advancement and where we were, I can remember playing Nintendo back when I was a kid, right? And you go from that to what we have now, which is almost lifelike. You've got graphics that are almost lifelike, and the power of the devices that we have now are larger than some warehouse computers were back in the 50s and 60s. So I think over time, yes, it will be achievable. It's just really a question of what that timeline is and how do we get there, and the technologies in between that will enable us to do that.
Mm-hmm. So it's the dream for sure. But I guess the question is also, are we going to sacrifice anything with that dream, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect world, so we're always going to have to make sacrifices in terms of fidelity when you try and do things of this nature, and in terms of have this seamless nature with things that aren't necessarily feature parity. Like some networks may have certain characteristics or traits that just aren't on other networks. That obviously doesn't lend itself well to that. You'd need maybe potentially a third solution to oversee all of those things and keep track of state management between the networks. I think if you look at, taking just the internet as an example, when someone goes to a computer and hops on a terminal, whether that's a Windows, Mac, Linux, cell phone, they're always being displayed the same content from those websites. They don't know what's going on in the background, and there could be a whole host of different hardware and software that accomplishes that, but the end result is the same. And I think that's what we'll end up having, is we'll have a layer of abstraction to where these use cases are being developed, and for the end user, it's one and the same.
Okay. So once we get to that point, people won't know, is your point, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, and even the same thing with the arguments about the metaverse, and is this a simulation, like Elon Musk talking about if this is a simulation, right? So at a certain point, it will become feasible to accomplish the things we're looking to do.
Okay. What do you feel are the main hurdles we're going to have to get over to make it there?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a lot of standardization. I think we're going to need networks and competitors potentially working together in order to sort through what needs to be done for the greater good of the users and the use cases.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. How do you see more closed environments, such as Manchester came out with the Etihad Stadium? How do you see them supporting interoperability?
Yeah, again, that's that one size doesn't fit all approach. So you're going to have situations where you have sort of closed source, centralized solutions for things that may ultimately plug into public networks like Dara, and potentially use platforms such as Hashport to enable users to do what they will with that. So, a group such as the one you just mentioned might be able to control everything that they want to control within their environment and their sort of metaverse or whatever they're trying to put to users. But then they give those users the ability or choice to then take an asset from their world and move it to somewhere else or interact with it in a different way that they may not necessarily have intended. So I think, again, that comes back to the standardization and the sort of building blocks. If we give developers and users the ability to have these assets that are easily or architected in the same way, then we can plug them into multiple different places. Mm-hmm. It's going to take some work, but I'm very hopeful and I think we'll get there.
Yeah, great. So what other interoperability focused projects are on your radar that you think will bring a lot of value to this space, or do you see any opportunities right now?
Yeah, I from what we have seen so far, I think there's a great opportunity in helping dApps to be able to migrate between platforms. So when we talk about those use cases, there's use cases that might need very fast transfers and a very high volume of movement that are going to require specific implementations to accomplish, like potentially in-game assets, for decentralized games being able to be quickly transferred between networks or between games and what have you. But for others, in particular, what I was just saying, migrating dApps, for instance, that only is going to require, one or two transactions on the part of the developer to migrate their non-circulating assets to the different network. And then after the fact, subsequently, you're going to have users follow along if they want to use that platform, or potentially you could have a case, where a platform decides they want to have a presence or their token on all of the other supported networks or a subset of them. And then in that case, you see dApps right now that do reside on several different networks at the same time, but none of those tokens talk to one another. They may be usable within those ecosystems on that developer's back end when they're interacting with the front end of the application, but they're not actually interchangeable for one another in any way. They're sort of siloed off. Whereas what we're hoping to try and do with Hashport is be able to have, if you're a developer and you have a token and you put it onto Hashport, or you use one of the networks as your starting point, if you then have the ability to move those assets to any of the other supported networks, then it becomes a lot more seamless, in the sense that you can be able to move around. Whether or not that that's going to be a big requirement, of having to be on multiple networks, I don't know if that will be the case. I think, again, everything's going to fall to the background, and the user is just going to be presented with one solution. Ultimately, I think, though, the biggest thing is going to be for developers that might, be in a situation where the network that they're on isn't as performant as they'd like, or they don't have certain, security properties and characteristics, that they're able to actually move to another network that's compatible, that they don't have to do a lot of re-architecting. They just have to change a few lines of code here and there. And then they move their supply over and they can, take full advantage of these new networks that are out. So I think that is going to be the biggest use case I can see for these platforms, in addition to, the individual user being obviously able to, if there's a popular asset, be able to hold on to that asset from one network, but then use the purchasing power of that asset in another network, potentially on, DeFi applications or whatnot. And then from a business and enterprise standpoint, being able to, re-architect some of those traditional existing business channels, I think, are going to be the main use cases.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So if there are people looking to get involved with that, helping dApps and pretty much everything you just said, how would you encourage people to get involved in this and to help be part of the change?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different for every person because everyone again is coming at it from a different perspective. They're going to have a different angle on it. I would say, just from my own personal experiences, is just focusing around the things that mean something to you and are important to you in your circle of competency. Everyone has something to bring to the space. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter who they are. There's space and room for everyone to find their niche and be able to contribute in a meaningful, impactful way. So I would just say, whatever it is, wherever you are, being able to just, take an interest in that particular area. And, if we're talking about interoperability and Hashport in specific, if you have a particular asset that you're interested in, or you want to see on, one network or the other, or, you're interested in, seeing if you can get those assets into other, platforms to be able to be implemented on those use cases. I think that's a great way to support and help is just to, reach out to those platforms and inquire. And if those platforms get enough interest from enough people, they're going to be like, hey, we need to actually seriously look into this because there's demand for it. I think as much as, communication channels have improved globally. I mean, right now, especially with the pandemic, being able to communicate with anyone and everyone anywhere at any time, which is great. I think the ability to get a hold of and communicate directly with decentralized applications and developers is still somewhat of a challenge, and it's hard for those platforms to get line of sight into their user bases and vice versa. So I think with time that'll improve. But again, if everyone is sticking around and focusing on what it is that they're interested in and letting it be known. I think it's much easier for developers and platforms to identify the things that users are looking for and implement those.
Mm-hmm. Great. Do you have any, I guess, specific use cases for me on someone that you know of in the space who's doing really well with interoperability right now?
Yeah. Like from a user standpoint or from a platform?
Platform, user standpoint, whatever comes to your mind first. Maybe both.
Yeah. I mean, in particular, working with Venly in particular,
yeah.
obviously, along with, there's a use case that we're implementing right now for a platform on Ethereum that's looking to migrate over to Hedera. And one of the key components for them was being able to harness the power of the Venly's wallet solution and be able to effectively, with just a few clicks, be able to have users not only have the assets from the one side of the equation, but also on the other side, because Venly supports all of the networks that we currently have on Hashport, which is Ethereum, Polygon, and Hedera, as well as a whole host of other ones. So, working with Venly,
great,
I think
love to hear it.
you really had to dig for that one. My apologies. But no, it's been wonderful, the experience being able to do that, because I think that is going to be one of the key pieces again, right? The service, the solution that Venly provides allows for users with very little knowledge or technical know-how to be able to use a platform like Hashport and be able to get the same thing done, where if they were using just a very open source implementation just by itself, such as like a MetaMask or something, they would have to set it up and configure it all themselves and go through a whole host of things, versus having, a single sign-on with a Google or a Twitter account. So I think the ease of use is really beneficial for the space.
Great. Thanks. I wasn't really digging for it, but I appreciate it. That's great. Awesome. So we're coming close to our end here. Is there anything specific that you feel like we haven't touched on that you really think is important to this discussion?
Yeah, obviously, go check out Hashport at hashport.network. I think users would be pleasantly surprised with the speed and security and just ease of use. We've really tried to make it about the user and the assets they're looking to move, as opposed to anything else. And as a result, it's a very quick and painless process to migrate assets. And over time, it's only going to get better with more options and networks. So really focus on that. I think that the space is rapidly expanding, and so are the tools and methods that developers can deploy to create new use cases. I see that trend continuing over time. And as a result of that, I see the experiences that users have access to are just going to get bigger and better over time. It's just going to lead to better overall experiences and outcome. And as a result, adoption is just going to keep, continuing to trend upward.
Awesome. Fantastic. Last note here. Is there anyone that you know of that we should invite on to Venly Expert Talks next?
Absolutely. I can't single anyone out, but I would say inviting anyone, and I've seen a few of them already on the show already. Perfect. But any one of our validators, I'm sure would be happy to stop by and discuss everything and anything to do with distributed ledgers.
Fantastic. Great. Well, then, thank you very much for coming to talk to me today, and hopefully at some point we can get together in person and meet. And
absolutely.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You as well. Thank you so much, Alex.
Great.